What makes off-grid living in Australia in 2026 truly attractive is the sense of complete independence it promises. Imagine freeing yourself from electricity companies that charge anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 every year. Add to that the annual demands from water corporations, which can reach around $1,000, along with sewage fees of about $800. On top of those costs, many councils attempt to regulate and control nearly every aspect of how people build and live. Escaping those ongoing expenses and restrictions is one of the biggest motivations behind the growing interest in off-grid lifestyles. However, the reality is that many people who attempt this lifestyle fail within their first 2 years. The primary reason is poor location selection. Some buyers unknowingly purchase land in shires where strict regulations are actively enforced. Others underestimate the difficulty and expense of establishing reliable water infrastructure. Many choose climates that make daily life uncomfortable or unsustainable. In addition, a large number of people neglect to thoroughly research council attitudes and enforcement practices before investing thousands of dollars into land and infrastructure. For off-grid living to succeed, it requires a careful balance of several essential factors. These include council tolerance or support, dependable water availability, a climate that remains manageable throughout the year, affordable and accessible land, and at least minimal services nearby for emergencies or supplies. These considerations are often far more important than technical specifications such as solar panel efficiency or the size of a water tank. From a financial perspective, establishing a full off-grid setup generally costs between $50,000 and $120,000. This figure usually includes the purchase of land, construction of a dwelling, installation of solar panels and battery systems, water infrastructure, and waste management solutions. Interestingly, this total is roughly equal to what many city residents spend on rent in just 2 to 4 years. Yet rent provides no permanent asset or long-term value. Extensive research into this topic involved examining council regulations across every Australian state, contacting shire planning departments to understand enforcement practices, reviewing bore logs and rainfall data to verify water availability, and speaking directly with off-grid residents about the real challenges they face. The result is a list of 12 towns and shires that represent very different alternatives from the commonly discussed locations. Each offers its own combination of climate, council attitudes, costs, and challenges, but all provide genuine possibilities for legal or tolerated off-grid independence. The first location on the list is the Shire of Leonora in Western Australia. This remote goldfields region lies about 800 kilometers north of Perth and has a population of roughly 500 people spread across a vast area. Although the Shire does not have formal policies supporting alternative housing, its extreme remoteness naturally creates a level of tolerance. Council inspections are rare, and many residents live in unconventional dwellings such as sheds and shipping containers without interference. Land in Leonora typically costs between $15,000 and $25,000 for residential or rural blocks. Annual rainfall is extremely low, around 250 millimeters, so significant water storage is necessary. Bore water is often available, though quality testing is essential. Solar power works exceptionally well throughout the year due to the strong sunlight. A typical off-grid setup might include $20,000 for land, $40,000 for an insulated shed dwelling, $13,000 for solar panels and batteries, $9,000 for water infrastructure including a bore, and $4,000 for a septic system, bringing the total to around $86,000. While summer temperatures frequently exceed 45 degrees Celsius, mining activity provides employment opportunities and the town maintains basic services like a medical clinic and small shops. In short, Leonora offers considerable freedom through its isolation, though extreme heat and distance from major centers are unavoidable trade-offs. Next is the Shire of Laverton, also in Western Australia. Located roughly 900 kilometers north of Perth with a population of about 300 people, Laverton is even more remote than Leonora. Due to limited staff and the sheer distance involved, council enforcement capacity is minimal. Alternative housing is scattered throughout the region without intervention, as the council focuses only on genuine problems rather than housing styles. Land here generally costs between $12,000 and $20,000. Rainfall is extremely low at approximately 200 millimeters per year, making bore water essential. Solar power generation is excellent, although the climate features intense desert heat. A typical setup might involve $16,000 for land, $38,000 for a modest dwelling, $12,000 for solar power, $10,000 for water infrastructure, including a bore and tanks, and $3,000 for a septic system. The total comes to about $79,000. Services remain limited, with only a small medical clinic operating restricted hours, but the extreme isolation attracts individuals seeking complete separation from conventional systems. The third option is the Shire of Coolgardie in Western Australia, a historic goldfields region located about 550 kilometers from Perth with a population near 1,000 people. The area's mining heritage has fostered a relaxed attitude toward unconventional living. Building standards are relatively flexible, and alternative housing on rural blocks is generally accepted. Land prices range from $20,000 to $35,000 depending on location. Average rainfall is approximately 260 millimeters annually, while groundwater bores are often viable. Solar energy production is excellent due to the strong sunshine, though summers can be extremely hot. A realistic off-grid setup may include $27,000 for land, $42,000 for a converted shed dwelling, $13,000 for solar power, $8,000 for water infrastructure, and $4,000 for septic installation, totaling about $94,000. Coolgardie also provides better access to services compared with more remote towns, including schools, shops, and a medical center, along with some tourism tied to its gold rush history. Another possibility is the Shire of Dundas in Western Australia. This southern goldfields region lies about 700 kilometers from Perth and east of Esperance, with around 1,500 residents across the Shire. Enforcement in rural areas is minimal, allowing alternative housing on larger blocks. The proximity to the southern coast helps moderate the harsh inland climate. Land suitable for off-grid living typically costs between $25,000 and $45,000. Rainfall averages about 350 millimeters each year, and the coastal influence reduces temperature extremes. Solar energy remains highly effective. Typical setup costs include $35,000 for land, $48,000 for a quality tiny house, $12,000 for solar equipment, $7,000 for water tanks, and $4,000 for a septic system. Although the total is about $106,000, residents benefit from more moderate weather conditions and coastal lifestyle advantages. The Shire of Northampton in Western Australia offers another option, located roughly 500 kilometers north of Perth along the coast. With around 3,000 residents, this Midwest coastal region has developed an informal acceptance of alternative lifestyles. Its scenic coastline and relaxed atmosphere attract people interested in off-grid living. Rural land generally costs between $40,000 and $60,000. Rainfall averages around 450 millimeters annually, and the Mediterranean coastal climate provides milder conditions than inland desert areas. Solar generation remains excellent. A typical setup might include $50,000 for land, $45,000 for an owner-built cabin, $11,000 for solar equipment, $5,000 for water tanks, and $3,000 for septic installation. This brings the total to roughly $114,000. Northampton also provides access to hospitals, schools, shops, and fishing along the coast, as well as an established community interested in alternative living. Three Springs in Western Australia represents a much cheaper option. Located about 300 kilometers north of Perth in the northern wheat belt, the town has roughly 600 residents. Land here is extremely affordable, and the local council tends to welcome new residents rather than strictly enforcing building regulations. Blocks can cost between $8,000 and $18,000. Rainfall averages about 350 millimeters annually. Bores are viable, and solar conditions are excellent. Summers are hot, while winters remain mild. A typical setup includes $13,000 for land, $35,000 for a shed-style dwelling, $10,000 for solar power, $8,000 for water infrastructure, and $3,000 for septic installation. At around $69,000 total, this is one of the most affordable off-grid setups available while still providing basic services such as a medical center and a functioning school. Moving to New South Wales, the Shire of Burke sits in the remote northwest along the Darling River. With approximately 3,000 residents and located about 780 kilometers from Sydney, Burke has developed an informal tolerance for alternative housing outside town boundaries. Enforcement is largely complaint-driven, meaning the council typically acts only when neighbors raise concerns. Rural land costs between $20,000 and $40,000, while annual rainfall averages around 350 millimeters. Bore water is usually accessible, and solar power performs well year-round. A typical setup might include $30,000 for land near the river, $38,000 for a basic dwelling, $11,000 for solar equipment, $8,000 for water infrastructure, including a bore, and $3,000 for septic installation. The total of roughly $90,000 provides access to a functioning hospital, supermarkets, schools, and other essential services, though summers can be extremely hot. Nearby Brewarina in New South Wales offers similar opportunities. Located about 800 kilometers from Sydney with a population around 2,000, the town sits along the Barwon River and has a long cultural history linked to Aboriginal heritage. Enforcement on rural properties is minimal due to the region's remoteness. Land costs range from $18,000 to $35,000, and rainfall averages about 400 millimeters per year. Bore water is viable, and solar power works well in the hot climate. A typical setup might include $26,000 for land, $36,000 for an economical dwelling, $10,000 for solar power, $7,000 for water infrastructure, and $3,000 for septic installation, totaling around $82,000. The town includes a hospital, schools, and shops, providing a functioning community despite its remote setting. Richmond Shire in northwest Queensland offers another option for people seeking maximum independence. Located about 900 kilometers from Townsville with roughly 1,000 residents across a vast area, the region's remoteness limits council enforcement. Alternative housing is widely accepted throughout the Shire. Land prices range from $15,000 to $30,000, while rainfall averages about 400 millimeters annually. Bore water and solar power both perform well in this environment, though summers are extremely hot. A realistic setup might include $22,000 for land, $40,000 for an insulated dwelling, $12,000 for solar panels and batteries, $8,000 for water infrastructure including a bore, and $3,000 for septic installation. The total comes to roughly $85,000, with basic services such as a clinic, shops, a school, and a fossil museum attracting tourism. Flinders Shire in western Queensland presents another viable location. The main town, Hughendon, sits within a region of about 2,000 people. Because of its remote setting, council enforcement remains minimal, and unconventional housing on rural blocks is generally tolerated. Land costs between $20,000 and $35,000. Rainfall averages around 450 millimeters annually, and both bore water and solar power work reliably. Typical setup costs include $27,000 for land, $42,000 for a shed conversion dwelling, $11,000 for solar equipment, $7,000 for water infrastructure, and $3,000 for septic installation. The total of about $90,000 provides access to a hospital, shops, schools, and a local economy driven largely by pastoral agriculture and tourism linked to dinosaur fossil discoveries. One of the best climate options appears in the Tablelands Regional Council area of Queensland. Located roughly 100 kilometers inland from Cairns in the tropical highlands, the Atherton Tablelands region includes around 45,000 residents. The climate here is exceptionally favorable for off-grid living, with mild temperatures year-round and substantial rainfall ranging between 1,200 and 2,000 millimeters annually. Land prices for private rural blocks generally range from $50,000 to $90,000. Solar generation remains good despite occasional cloud cover. A realistic setup might involve $70,000 for land, $50,000 for an insulated cabin built with local materials, $12,000 for solar equipment, $3,000 for minimal water infrastructure thanks to reliable rainfall, and $4,000 for septic installation. The total of about $139,000 is higher than many remote locations. But the region offers excellent living conditions, hospitals, schools, shopping centers, and an established permaculture and alternative living community. Finally, the top location combines several ideal factors. Charters Towers Regional Council in Queensland. This inland city of about 12,000 residents allows rural blocks outside town boundaries to operate with minimal building enforcement. Councils focus primarily on regulations within the city itself rather than surrounding rural properties. Land costs range from $35,000 to $60,000, and rainfall averages around 600 millimeters annually. Bore water is available in many areas, and solar power generation is excellent. Summers are hot but manageable, while winters remain mild. A typical setup includes $47,000 for land, $45,000 for an owner-built dwelling, $12,000 for solar power and batteries, $6,000 for water infrastructure, and $4,000 for septic installation, totaling about $114,000. The nearby city provides hospitals, schools, shops, and historic architecture from the Gold Rush era, creating a rare balance between rural independence and access to essential services. Overall, these 12 locations illustrate the remarkable diversity of off-grid opportunities across Australia. Western Australia dominates the list because it contains many remote shires with minimal enforcement and very cheap land. In contrast, New South Wales and Queensland often provide better climates and rainfall, which makes daily life more comfortable. Goldfields areas such as Leonora, Laverton, and Coolgardie offer extreme remoteness where regulations are rarely enforced simply because inspectors seldom visit. However, these regions also experience brutal heat exceeding 45 degrees Celsius and extremely low rainfall, requiring large water storage systems that can cost $10,000 or more. Other regions such as Three Springs and Northampton offer more moderate conditions, while locations in New South Wales provide river access and functioning services. Queensland locations, particularly the Tablelands and Charters Towers, offer the best overall climates and living conditions, although land costs tend to be higher. Despite the challenges, the financial mathematics of off-grid living remain compelling. Initial setup costs of $60,000 to $140,000 can eliminate rent and utility bills permanently. Annual living costs may drop to around $12,000 to $18,000 for essentials like food, vehicle fuel, maintenance, and modest council rates. Over 10 years, someone paying $25,000 annually in rent might spend $250,000 without owning anything, while an off-grid resident could accumulate significant property value and savings. Ultimately, success depends on careful preparation and honest self-assessment. Prospective residents should visit locations in both summer and winter, confirm water availability through bore records and rainfall data, speak directly with council planners, and connect with local off-grid residents to understand daily realities. They should also verify road access, soil quality, bushfire ratings, and mobile coverage while budgeting for unexpected expenses. Off-grid living is not a temporary experiment. It represents a permanent lifestyle transformation that requires commitment, practical skills, and realistic expectations. Those who choose locations aligned with their climate preferences, social needs, and financial capabilities can achieve genuine independence and long-term stability. Across Australia, opportunities for permanent off-grid housing remain real. With careful planning and the right location, the freedom from rent, utility bills, and corporate systems can truly change lives.